This bill really seeks to reinforce one of our commitments to civil and political rights through the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights, particularly refer to Article 19, which states that everyone shall have the right to hold opinions without interference. Without interference. It also states that everyone shall have the right to freedom of expression, and that this right shall include freedom to seek, receive and impart information and ideas of all kinds, regardless of frontiers, either orally, in writing or in print, in the form of art or through any other media of his choice or her choice. Now, what we find today is that we have a grave problem with foreign social media services. We're talking about big tech. We're talking about outfits like Facebook, outfits like Twitter, outfits like Google and YouTube, outfits like Instagram, outfits like WeChat, outfits like TikTok, which have become notoriously censorious of political discourse. In fact, and it's probably the biggest example, the then leader of the free world, the former President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, was taken down off a fair few of these platforms, particularly Facebook and Twitter. And that was much to the delight of the left across the world. But there was one person who was left-leaning. He didn't like Donald Trump at all. He was one of the early investors in Twitter, US venture capitalist Fred Wilson, who said this, and I think it behoves all of those who delighted in the former president being removed from social media to listen to these words. Fred Wilson said, "I think it is problematic that Twitter has this much power. Not only are they silencing Trump, they are taking away his tens of millions of followers and they are prohibiting all of his followers from seeing his tweets. We should be careful what we wish for. This is a slippery slope we are headed down. This should be a warning sign to everyone in DC, the senators, the representatives, the folks leaving the White House and the folks entering it. He who kills the king becomes the king." Repeat those words from Fred Wilson. He who kills the king becomes the king. We have now so much power invested in this big tech oligarchy. In fact, the American Civil Liberties Union, not known for their like for President Trump or their like for right-wing political views, their senior legislative counsel, Kate Ruan, said this: "It should concern everyone when companies like Facebook and Twitter wield unchecked power to remove people from platforms that have become indispensable for the speech of billions." And that's where we're at. These platforms now form the public square. They form the place where ideas are debated, where ideas are put forward, where discussion ensues. We have these big tech oligarchies controlling that space where political and philosophical and ideological, cultural and social discourse goes on all around the world, including in this nation. We've had a member of parliament in this place, in fact at least two of them, who have been removed, cancelled from these big tech outfits, one of which is my friend the member for Hughes. Whatever you think of his views, he is an elected member of parliament. He wasn't saying anything that was illegal, either on Facebook or on YouTube. He had a video of a speech given to this place removed from YouTube. Further than that, he had his entire profile taken down of Facebook and of Instagram. I can refer to the member for Cook, the Prime Minister, who had his posts removed from WeChat. Now, they were not particularly unlawful. They weren't particularly egregious. They were just simply putting forward the views of the Australian government to people of Chinese ethnicity in this country. But he was taken off WeChat. We had a foreign social media service, ostensibly controlled by the Chinese Communist Party, silencing the Prime Minister of this country in his own country. If that does not ring alarm bells, I do not know what does in this place. the 1688 Bill of Rights, something that all parliamentarians should read up on, because it really did establish modern democracy and Westminster democracy that we are part of in this place. And that said in that Bill of Rights that the freedom of speech and debates or proceedings in Parliament ought not to be impeached or questioned in any court or place out of Parliament. And yet we have big tech that can actually take down parliamentary proceedings, debates or videos of debates, or I guess even quotes from debates off their platforms that they don't like. It extends from members of Parliament to media organisations. Sky News had many videos removed from YouTube, not for illegal things, again, but because it breached what these big tech outfits call their community standards. There's another term for community standards. It's called editorial guidelines, but these outfits pretend that they're not publishers. And by the fact that they call them community guidelines rather than editorial guidelines, it gets them away with it and gets them out of facing defamation. They can't have it both ways. You can't be editors that are chopping and changing the content on their platforms and not be liable for things that are said on those platforms. But what I would prefer is that simply free speech was let to run unabated on these platforms, except for, of course, illegal speech or defamatory content. The fact is, foreign social media services are interfering in the political discourse in this country. I have outlined that already. We have gone in this parliament and protected big news media against foreign social media services, or at least we've put the money of big tech into the pockets of big news corporations in this country, but we have done nothing to protect the little people out there. My bill seeks to do that. It seeks to do that in two respects. It gives a terminology of protected persons, which really do form the pillar of democracy, the pillars of democracy in this country. It says that there should be no censorship against lawful content from politicians, political candidates, political parties, journalists and news organisations. At the same time, it would provide recourse for people who are censored for their philosophical discourse on social media, allow them a pathway to go to the Australian Communications and Media Authority to adjudicate whether it was right for that censorship to occur. And if it doesn't, in both instances, there would be fines of over $1 million against these big tech outfits. This is very important. And if I could close with a large quote from Joel Kotkin, it explains everything. Read the book, The Coming of Neo-Feudalism. It says, not satisfied with controlling information pipelines, the tech oligarchs have been moving to shape content as well. Controllers like those at Facebook and Twitter seek to curate content on their sites or even eliminate views they find objectionable, which tend to be conservative views, according to former employees. Algorithms intended to screen out hate groups often spread a wider net, notes one observer, since the programmers have trouble distinguishing between hate groups and those who might simply express views that conflict with the dominant culture of Silicon Valley. That managers of social media platforms aim to control content is not merely the perception of conservatives. Over 70% of Americans believe that social media platforms censor political views, according to a recent Pew study. With their quasi-monopoly status, Facebook and Google don't worry about competing with anyone, as the tech entrepreneur Peter Thiel observes, so they can indulge their own prejudices to a greater extent than the businesses that might be concerned about alienating customers. With their tightening control over media content, the tech elite